Hello, Guilty Feminist. This is Deborah. A big thank you to everyone who's bought my book, 6 Conversations We're Scared to Have, and is reading it or listening to it on audiobook, has come out to a live event. I appreciate you so much. Thank you to those who've written to me to tell me how much you're enjoying it as well. Now, I did a right-wing podcast. Many of you will know this because a fellow author said it's called 6 Conversations We're Scared to Have. You need to reach across the aisle. Consequently, I have been trolled by the manosphere in a way that I have never experienced in my whole life. It's absolutely fine. It's okay. But they have gone onto Amazon and they've given me these artificial 1-star reviews and said, nasty, damning things. They have not read it. They're not verified readers. So I would love it if you're reading it and enjoying it, or you have read it, if you would go on to Amazon and leave an accurate review. I'm not asking for fake reviews. I'm not asking for inauthentic reviews. I'm asking for your review, your genuine review of the book, to counteract these fake reviews of guys who've seen a clip on Instagram of me talking to manosphere guys and have decided to drive the sales down. I would appreciate that so much. If you're going to do that and you wouldn't mind stopping by Goodreads and Waterstones as well to leave reviews there, that's going to make, or anywhere else you can leave reviews, that's going to make a difference as well. If you're doing this and you fancied going on to wherever you get your podcasts or Apple and leaving a review for the Guilty Feminist podcast, even if you've reviewed it before, that helps other people find it, and hit the subscribe button. These are great ways of supporting us, and I really, really appreciate you. You don't realize how much I appreciate you, especially at this time when I'm getting trolled by the manosphere so mercilessly. Thank you so much for your endless support. And now back to the podcast. Hello, Guilty Feminist. This is Deborah, and welcome to this episode on the Windrush scandal. My guest today is an actor who you will have seen on British television in comedies such as The Fast Show, The Thin Blue Line, and Jeeves and Wooster, dramas such as Midsummer Murders, Outlander, and the upcoming The War Between the Land and the Sea, as well as movies from Batman Begins to Thomas and Friends. He's also a passionate campaigner and spokesperson for Justice for Windrush. It's an enormous honour to welcome to the podcast Colin McFarlane.
Woo!
Hello, Colin.
Hello,
Thank you so much for
Deborah.
joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Many listeners might think the Windrush scandal is in the past, but it's still ongoing. Is that right?
Yeah, the historical roots are quite definitely in the past. And we recently put up on our website or Instagram a message from the government's own website, which I will read for you because it is pretty shocking, but tells you what is behind all of this. They had a 3-year court battle to stop this being put on their website. But if you go to gov.uk, you will see this. It says major immigration legislation in 1962, 1968, and 1971 was designed to reduce the amount of people living in the United Kingdom who do not have white skin. And when you sort of take that in, you go, what? And so we recently gave a talk, actually in Lincolnshire, in Reform Country, on purpose, which is where I grew up. My father was in the RAF. So my dad still lives in Lincoln, and I know it's sort of 98% white. And I thought, actually, let's go and see if we can educate my friends in Lincolnshire. And we gave them a talk and gave them a little history lesson. And I asked them, first of all, have you ever heard of the 1919 race riots? And they said, do you mean the riots in the summer? I said, no, 1919. And they're like, no. I said, no, don't worry. Most people haven't. But they happened in Cardiff and Liverpool and Glasgow and also eventually London, but all the seaports, basically. And then I said, if you wind forward to the end of World War II, 2 million white British people left this country because it was devastated. And they went to America, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, South Africa, and the old Rhodesia. And so 2 million people left, and Churchill pleaded with them not to go and said, please don't leave our dear land. But they went. So in 1946, another little known fact is there was something called Operation Westward Ho, where they invited 180,000 people from Europe, but that still wasn't enough people. So in 1948, we have the Immigration Act with free movement of people across Europe, the opposite of Brexit. And the idea was to bring all the white people back, as it were. But of course, what happened? The black and brown people came and this is the roots of where we are now.
So, can you describe the Windrush generation in your own words? Who were they, and what
Hmm.
did they contribute to Britain?
They were my father's generation, who came here my father came here in 1955, my mother in 1954. And they were people from the Caribbean and from the Commonwealth who came to rebuild Britain after the Second World War. The roots of this scandal are that we don't teach our British colonial history, so people don't know this. So, for example, Britain ruled Jamaica from 1655, something my dad and all his schoolmates knew, but is rarely taught here. And yet my dad was taught the English curriculum. So it's that generation. And because they came on a ship called the Windrush, that came to symbolize that generation. But the history of that ship was actually that it was owned by the Germans. And they rather horribly transported Jewish um, prisoners from Norway to concentration camps in Germany. Then the Brits took over that ship, and it became the Windrush. So it's got a pretty horrible history. But yeah, that's really what it means. The Windrush generation is that era. But there are 65 different countries that are affected by the Windrush scandal.
So, when people think of the Windrush generation, where did those people come from? And why were they invited to Britain? And what do they contribute to Britain?
They came largely from the Caribbean, but also from Africa, India, South Asia. So you're looking at India, Bangladesh, Pakistan. It's basically countries from the Commonwealth. Um, it's come to symbolize the Caribbean population more because they were most of the passengers on the Windrush ship. But people came in different ways. My mother, for example,
Right.
came by plane. She didn't like, she got seasick. So she came on the plane in 54, my dad in 55. But the Windrush ship itself came in 1948, which was the year of the Immigration Act. So initially it was a small amount of people, and then it got bigger year on year. And unfortunately, there was a massive backlash. And the people here weren't told that these people were British citizens that were invited to help. So when I talk to my father about it, he always goes, look, we love the mother. What people don't realize in Britain is that we absolutely worship the mother country. We raised money for it during both World Wars, World War One and World War Two. We had a Jamaica squadron that we funded during World War Two. So everything about, because we were ruled by Britain from 1655, my parents being from Jamaica, he said everything we did was we all have a picture of the Queen on our walls. The mother country was our dream. So we came here. He said we were invited here to help. We thought we would be greeted with open arms, and sadly they were greeted with the opposite.
What did they contribute? Like, what kind of work did they do? What kind of community building did they do when they came to the UK?
When they
When
came
Jamaica came
here,
to the UK?
they did all the, I guess, what you call all the jobs that weren't in an office. They weren't allowed to work. So my dad worked for a British company in Jamaica. He was an engineering draftsman. Worked for a company called Reginald Aitken. He had a reference so that when he came over, he thought he'd walk straight into a job. The first job he went for, they said, you're overqualified for this. I'll just go and have a chat with my bosses. He came back and said, look, you'd be perfect for the job, but we can't have people like your countrymen in the office. But we can start you on the factory floor. My dad was like, you just told me I'm overqualified. I don't want to start on the factory floor. But my dad at that point thought it was just a one-off. So he kept going for interviews because he had the paperwork. And they kept saying the same thing. So in the end, I said to him, because I'm helping with this book at the moment, and I said, what did you do? Did you think it was racism? Did you? He said, no, we just thought they don't understand us. They'll get to know who we are, and it'll all be fine. And so I kept going to interviews, kept getting the same response. And so I had to choose what job. So he then worked on the buses. So his dreams were dashed straight away. He couldn't follow the route that he was on. So he worked on the buses. And then my mother was working as a nurse. And then there was national service in those days. And so this is the crazy thing, is that after a couple of, I think it was after about a year, he got a letter through the letterbox saying, "Can you join up?" And my dad was said to me, he said, I was British enough to do national service, but I wasn't British enough to work in an office. So he said we resisted for 2 years because if you were going to get married, you could defer it. And that worked the first two times, but the third time it didn't work. He had to go and have an interview. And he was told if he failed, he wouldn't have to join. So he deliberately failed. And then they called him in and said, right, well, you failed the RAF and the Navy, so you can join the Army. And he was like, oh, no, no, no. I was told I didn't have to join any of them.
God.
And so he said, can I take the exam again? Because he'd heard in Jamaica that the RAF was the most tolerant. So he took the exam again. He passed and he joined the RAF reluctantly, kicking and screaming were his words. And he then had to go and train up north, which was also bizarre for him because my mum and we were small children, we're down south. And he did this very harsh training regime, and he didn't want to stay in, and he thought he'd leave. But then they said, you can get accommodation if you stay in for a certain amount of time. And at that point, my dad, because you couldn't, as people probably remember, you couldn't get accommodation in the 1950s. It was no blacks, no Irish, no dogs on all the accommodation signs. And I said to him, well, how did you get anywhere to live? He said, there was a black landlord. I said, well, how does he become a landlord if you can't get a decent job? He said, construction. You could work in construction because you weren't in the office. It was about being next to your white countrymen. They didn't want that. So out and on the construction site, that was fine. So Mr. Wright, his name was, had a place in northwest London. My parents had one room in a house in London. So when he heard that he could get accommodation, he was like, well, maybe I'll stay in longer. And my dad ended up staying in the RAF for 30 years and got an MBE from King Charles. And so he actually was the inspiration for this campaign, because he did an interview with one of the papers that I put on socials, and the wonderful Annie Lennox, who I know you know well. Annie saw it in Los Angeles, and we'd met 5 years before when I was doing a TV series called Outlander up in Scotland. And we just hit it off and kept in touch. And then she saw that, and she got hold of my acting agent and said, can I speak to Colin about Windrush? And I said, of course. And we started Zooming in spring 23. And first thing I said to her, she said, how can I be of service? I'll never forget it. And I said, well, Annie, I'd love one of your songs because we need to raise awareness about this. And I thought she'd say, F off. And she went, which one do you want? I went, I think it'd be that simple.
Wow.
She said, yeah, which one do you want? I said, well, why? Because that sort of says everything. And she said, fine, I'll just have to re-record it though, because Sony owned the original. And I was like, oh, you're going to re-record it? That's even better. So bless her, she came over on my birthday, September the 15th in 2023. She recorded in her hotel room in Notting Hill. I then sat down and did a kind of mini live aid and got on my book and started ringing all my famous friends, and just said, we've only got 2 days to shoot this. Can you come and just appear in the film? And the likes of Hannah Waddingham and Eddie Marsan and Adrian Lester all said yes, and Doreen Lawrence, Leroy Logan, and we got this amazing group of people, and we made a little film that lasted 2 minutes. And from that, it kind of exploded in terms of the Mayor of London getting in touch, and Lord Adebowale talking about us in the House of Lords. And so the whole thing grew from that. And I said to Annie, what do we do? You've paid for the film. That's fantastic. But now we've got to raise some money and set something up. So we then formed a charity in July 2024. And so now our aim is to do something every 2 or 3 months to raise awareness, because when I was in Lincolnshire talking to these wonderful Lincolnshire ladies whose videos you can see on our Instagram at J for Windrush, and you'll hear them talking and going, I know a little bit about Windrush, but not very much. And then we gave a talk, and then we went back a week later and interviewed them. And they were all upset and angry. They were going, why don't we teach this in schools? Why don't we know our British colonial history? I didn't know they were invited here. I didn't know we treated them like this. Why are people still being deported, still being detained? So we have a Windrush lawyer that we took on, who's pro bono, we don't charge a penny. And we put out an appeal on Instagram about 3 weeks ago now, and we've had 32 new cases come forward. And of the people we speak to, a lot of them are going, we're too scared to come forward. We're only coming forward to you because we trust you. We've been following what you're doing on socials, and for once we feel we've got a voice. But unfortunately, a lot of lawyers take a cut. They take a percentage of whatever they get from the compensation. We don't take anything. So we have joined up with Clifford Chance in the city because we thought we need some serious legal support. There is no, for those people who know nothing about it, if you compare it to all the other scandals, post office scandal, the blood scandal, etc., all of those scandals, even though they've been treated appallingly, they at least have legal aid. And sadly, I just went to a conference yesterday. On every metric you apply, the Windrush compensation scheme is at the bottom. It pays out the least amount of money. It's 80% of the people are yet to be compensated. So the least amount of money, the least people compensated, and the highest burden of proof. You have to prove again that you're British when the government have admitted that got that wrong and therefore set up a compensation scheme. They're still asking you to prove your citizenship. So we're doing an event in London, in de Beauvoir in Hackney on Saturday, June 21st. And we're going to have, it was going to be obviously majorly about raising awareness, but we've got the likes of Eddie Marsan coming down, and Ashley B, who's going to do a wonderful reading about the history between the Caribbean and the Irish from actually the 1620s to underline this lack of awareness we have about our history. And so we're going to be having a Windrush band, we're going to be having Caribbean food, we're going to be having, it's basically going to be a celebration, but it's going to be mixed with a huge amount of awareness raising. So we'll have victims talking about what they're going through right now, because what we discovered, and when Annie and I first talked about this, we went, people think this is over. It's always talked about in the past, like, there's this thing that happened with the Windrush generation. And what we have to explain to people is, no, it's still sadly going on.
So essentially, people who were British when they came here, they were invited here, they were part of the quote unquote empire, and therefore they had British citizenship, were invited here to do jobs after the Second World War that were not filled. We didn't have enough people to do those jobs. But if they didn't have the money or the need for a passport and to update their documents, suddenly they were told, well, even though they'd invested here, they'd built here, they'd educated their children here, they'd contributed for many years, they'd served in the armed forces, they could just be deported as, no, you're Caribbean, even though some of them had come at 2 years old with their parents. They were like,
That's almost, Deborah, that's almost right. Um, but actually, most of them did have passports. So my father, for example, had the Jamaican passport. What happened was they kept changing the legislation. So hence the quote I gave at the beginning, in 62, 68, and 71, they made changes to the immigration legislation that meant you now had to provide proof that you shouldn't have to provide it, because you were already British citizens. So
right.
this is why it's complex, because it's deliberately complex in order to exclude Black and brown people from living and working in the UK. So that's the issue. So when people kind of go, I don't quite get it, did they lose their papers? And you go, no, there was deliberate policy, because there was a massive backlash. We all know about Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech. But there was, just generally speaking, we don't want these people here. So it's like, how do we do that covertly?
So they
So there've been
changed the rules so no
they changed the
paperwork's good
rules.
enough, basically.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So you'll see that we have a new film, which I won't reveal the twist, but I think I've sent it to you privately.
It's really good.
Thank you. We're going to be screening that in the church in Hackney on Saturday, the 21st of June. And that is kind of because it's a person talking about what's happened to him, and it's a true story.
So can you tell me, Colin, what happened in 2012 under the hostile environment policy?
That was when basically Theresa May and David Cameron went, Nigel Farage is getting a lot of traction talking about anti-immigration. And we have become too nice. We need to return to becoming the nasty party. So let's basically turbocharge those policies that began in 1948 and make it incredibly difficult for people to stay in this country. And so what they did was they moved the checking points from, instead of it now being just at the airport, it was now at school, in the hospitals, at your workplace. So if, for example, you couldn't produce papers, which is to say, with the Windrush generation, they had warned them they shouldn't be doing this to the Windrush generation, because they won't need papers, because they're British citizens, because they're from the British colonies. So what would happen is, one of the cases we got £300,000 for, although he was probably owed about 1.5 million, he couldn't work for 20 years, and he worked in construction. And he had a child that was ill, so he took a year off work, and then he had to go back to work. And when he went back to work, they said, "Where are your right to work papers?" And he said, "What?" He said, "I've been working for 20 years." And he said, "We need your right to work papers." So he's going, I didn't know what they were talking about. He said, "I didn't understand the system, Colin. All I was told was, where's your right to work papers?" I said, "I don't need any right to work papers." So he said, "I couldn't get a job. And all the people that knew me, they'd say, 'No, we know you're all right. We'll give you a job.' But then they realised that if they gave me a job and the Home Office went and investigated, and I didn't have these right to work papers, they'd be fined £20,000. So they then couldn't employ him. So he couldn't work for 20 years.
My God.
And
And
when
also
we started,
presumably couldn't get any benefits either.
correct, there you go.
So,
So you don't get
because of
benefits, you
course,
don't get
because you can't,
healthcare,
and NHS, you can't get the NHS.
can't get the NHS,
So
can't get a
what do you
job.
do?
You basically become homeless unless you've got family to support you. And that's one of the big things that we're doing now, is raising a hardship fund, because we have all these victims going, I can't pay my bills and I haven't done anything wrong. And so he didn't know what to do. He went to a solicitor who was sort of out of her depth, bless her. And he was then told, go to your MP. He went to his MP, got referred to the parliamentary ombudsman. That's the route you have to take. But then he was told, yes, you qualify for us to look at this, but it'll take 12 months. There's a 12-month waiting list. He'd already been out of work for 20 years. And then I was
God,
the solicitor put me on to him. I
God.
said that we've got a pro bono Windrush lawyer. We then took on his case, and within a few months we got him the money. But we got him £300,000, and I said to him, "What was your average earnings?" He said, "About 30 grand a year." I said, "Well, you haven't worked for 20 years, plus the impact on your life, on your mental health,
Your lack of
the money you
purpose.
borrowed."
If your purpose
Yeah,
just becomes proving you are who you say you are, it'll send you
yeah,
mad. Like,
that,
just
which is
so,
what's happened to them.
yeah, instead of your purpose being, I go to my job, I say hi to this person, I feel like I've done a good day's work, I come home, I put food on my
Thank
family's table. Your purpose now becomes just desperately trying to prove who you are while
you. Yeah,
hoping a family member will take you in and support you, which of course is demoralizing and demeaning and makes you feel just like your whole world's being turned upside down and you're being tortured for nothing. So this
thank you.
is
That's the perfect description. And that's what we're getting is people coming forward traumatized,
it
and then
must
they're
be.
saying,
And
and then they're
many
saying,
will become homeless because how many people
yes,
have got family that have a permanent spare bedroom and can afford to support a whole other family member? And lots of families will budge up and there'll be a, sofa bed and things like that. But it's a long old time, isn't it? 20 years to be camping out on someone else's sofa bed. It's a big strain on a family. Some people just wouldn't have the money. They'll have a number of Windrush people in their families who can't prove their status and they'll end up homeless. I mean, it's
correct.
just
And then
terrible.
you've got, and on top of that, Deborah, you have people, and this is the most horrible one, is that you have, I mean, you asked the question, what was the hostile environment? And in that conversation, Amelia Gentleman wrote a brilliant book called The Windrush Betrayal about this, and I've
We
touched
had
on you
her
a
on
lot.
to talk about this at the Barbican. It was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and she said that they actually said in this meeting, anti-immigration policy is worth less to the country financially than pro-immigration, but anti-immigration gets us votes,
Ugh,
and that is where we are.
it makes us so sad to hear this. Or
Yeah.
I know all of my listeners will feel just devastated to hear this. Can I ask why the compensation scheme has failed?
Yeah, it's. I just was literally at a meeting with about this yesterday. The main reason it's failed is the lack of legal aid because it's incredibly complex, deliberately so.
Right.
So it's a 44-page document, just the one you have to fill in. Then there's a 100-odd-page document advising you on the 44-page document. So everybody that's attempted to fill that in has failed if they haven't had a lawyer because it's just deliberately complicated. So that's why we went, right, what's the biggest thing? I mean, Wendy Williams did an investigation commissioned by the government called the Lessons Learned Review. And she put 30 recommendations of what needed to happen to make this move quickly and smoothly.
Right.
They've all been rejected
Right.
because someone said, how do you solve this? I went, well, adopt the 30 recommendations and have legal aid sorted. So they've deliberately made that impossible. As I say, of all the scandals, and we have so many, that's why I think what Sir Alan Bates was saying the other day when he said, we need an independent public body that looks after compensations when the government institutions are involved. It needs to be taken away from them. And the trouble is, the Home Office are the ones who committed the crime,
Yeah, they
and
don't want to do it.
they're the ones making the judgments on whether you're going to get compensation for their crime.
It's
How on earth? Why would
so
anybody
that's
do
like
that?
someone runs into my car.
Yeah,
I want them to pay for my car. They get to decide whether they do or not.
perfect.
It makes no sense.
It's madness. And so we're dealing with that madness. So, we have a case that came in last week of a young girl. She was only like 17, 18 and had to get, there's so many hurdles. You've got to get naturalization papers before you can even get your passport. And that all of this costs money, which they don't have because you've stopped them from working because you've accused them of being illegal. The video that you saw that's based on a lovely guy called Chris Hayaball's story. Chris came to Lincolnshire with me to talk to the Lincolnshire ladies who were blown away by what he's been through and were crying. I mean, and Chris has not been able to get a passport for 15 years. And what makes this worse is that he was working with autistic children and he was working with this particular child that he had a rapport with. And he'd been promoted by the company, thanked by the parents because he was the only person that had managed to get through to their child. They then accused him his car was broken into, lost all his documents. That's how it started. He thought, I'll just get them replaced. That's where his nightmare began. He's never been able to replace them. They wouldn't allow him to stay in the job because he was now illegal. And he has had mental health issues. And when he came to Lincoln with me, it was only when I got back to London with him, And I was trying to get him to come to a show. We wanted to give him a treat to go and see a Tina Turner show. And he wouldn't leave the house. And I said, what do you mean you won't leave the house? He said, well, he said, you don't understand, Colin. What I do is, I know it sounds crazy, but I think they're coming to get me. I said, what? I think they're coming to get me. So when I go to the corner shop, I literally wrap myself up in all my clothes and you just see my glasses. Because I just think like, they're watching me, they're going to come and get me. I went, Chris, you have done nothing wrong. He said, I know, but it's gone on for so long, they grind you down. And I start to lose my mind. And that's the reality. And we had a couple who, I haven't met them yet. I'm meeting them on the 21st when they come to the show. And he's mixed race. His wife is white. Now, this is extraordinary, and I think is the basis of our drama. We're developing a drama on this with Kudos, because I said, look, people do not understand this. And the best way to do that is to tell, like the post office scandal drama, which created massive awareness. I said, we have to do something similar. So I pitched an idea, which now I've had a real life version of come to us, which is I said to them, I think if you want to take the audience with you to understand the roots of this scandal and have sympathy and empathy for it, then your leading character needs to be white. I said, I think she needs to be working in the Home Office and not know anything about Windrush. And her partner is black. He's accused of being illegal. His life starts to go down the pan, and she starts to dig in the Home Office to find out how she can help him. And in so doing, uncovers a murder from 1919, which did actually happen during the race riots. And that has ramifications today. And I won't spoil the rest of it, but I've then given them some twists and turns, and we've got a writer in. We then met this couple who went to see Clifford Chance to share their story, and Clifford Chance is going to help them. And he said, my wife tried to leave me, or did leave me, because she didn't believe why I couldn't get a job. And I said, because the government are telling me I'm illegal. But you're not illegal. What are you talking about? I don't believe you. And he's going, no, but this is what they're doing. I haven't got any papers because I'm a British citizen. We didn't need papers, but suddenly we do. And now there's this massive burden of proof. And if you can't prove it, you can't get a job. And she didn't believe him. So he said they split up, went back and forth. They're now back together. And he said, I thought this was amazing. I haven't met him yet, but our lawyer, Pauline Campbell, said to me, he said to the lawyers, he was offered £20,000 in compensation. He said, it's a total joke. How do you compensate someone for taking their life away from them? And he said, I would pay somebody £20,000 to experience my life for a day as a result of what happened to me. And I went, wow. And that's the heart of this, because it is so unbelievable. And his wife didn't believe him.
Are there
So how do
still
you,
people now who can't work
yeah,
because they haven't? How
correct.
many people in this country? So
There are 15,000 victims estimated.
who currently
We
now can't prove their status and live in the threat
correct.
of deportation, can't use the
Yes,
NHS, can't get a job.
all of that. Yeah. Yeah. And they won't come forward. Martin Ford, who devised the compensation scheme and then resigned because he said it's complex. He said, I know I've designed a complex scheme, but that's to make sure that they get what they deserve, but they need legal support. And the government refused to give legal support, so he stepped away. And he said to me, Colin, until the government acknowledge that people are scared to come forward because you're still deporting people. So he said, if you stop deporting people and stop detaining people, a lot more people will come forward. They won't do that because they don't want them to come forward. So that's the feeling when you talk to victims and survivors. They all say they don't care. They don't want us to have the money. They put aside originally £570 million, which they keep sort of reducing each year by going, oh, well, not enough have come forward, so the pot's going to get smaller. They're not coming forward because they don't trust you. For the beautiful analogy, Deborah, you gave me earlier about, why would you, if someone bashed into your car and then they're the ones making the decision about who gets the money? And it's absurd. So you're in this kind of Kafkaesque nightmare, frankly. And that's when we went, right, okay, let's educate the nation, which is our strapline for Justice for Windrush. And I said, what we have to do is literally in sound bites, almost like bit by bit, start to explain to people why this happened. Yes, the roots of it, sadly, are institutional racism. But actually, this government and it was both governments, sadly, Labour and Conservative are guilty, they're very clever. So the messaging is always, we're working hard to right the wrongs, which just is like a dagger through the heart of the victims, because they go, no, you're not. I've got to go through, it's an average 2 to 3 years to get to any money out of the compensation scheme. You've got 2 tiers you've got to go through.
But if you apply for it, you're in danger of being deported.
Yes, all of that. because they can turn around again and say, well, where's your papers in it? So that's why no one's coming forward. So that's why we went, well, we've got to give them legal help.
Can you clarify something for me, Colin?
Yes, go on.
So you said there was a 17-year-old girl,
Yeah.
but how could she be part of the Windrush generation?
Because it's the Windrush generation and their descendants. So that's why this is so massive. So if your mother or father is accused of being illegal, now it has ramifications on the children.
Even if you were born here?
Yes, that's the horrible thing. That's the frightening thing.
So your mum was invited over. She was a British citizen in Jamaica because at that time, if you lived in Jamaica, you were a British citizen. She was invited over to do a job that there weren't enough people to do. And they said, could you come over and do that job? Wasn't allowed to work in an office, had to work in a job she didn't necessarily want to work in, but did it. Loved the mother country, had a picture of the Queen. She comes over, she has kids over here. Everyone believes they're British. They are British. The mum's worked as a nurse or whatever in a service industry. Then there's a 17-year-old daughter. Is it also granddaughter?
Yeah, the whole line.
Yes, because I was going to say 17 is probably granddaughter at this point, isn't it? So 17-year-old will be a granddaughter of that. So that woman who's a nurse has a child. That child has a child. They're 3 generations living in Britain. They don't know anything else. And that 17-year-old wants to get a passport to go on a school trip. They go, you're not British.
This happened to he's in our campaign video, Cash, who's a music star now. He was a budding footballer before he became a pop star, wanted to go abroad at 12, 13 years old to play football. He was doing really well, so they're going to France. And he couldn't go because he didn't have the right papers. And he didn't understand. He was a kid. And so he thought, I'll leave it. I'll wait till I get older. And then he tried again when he got older, and he still couldn't get the right papers. And so I said, what did you do? He said, I just told myself, I obviously just have to stay in this country. I can't travel. He then becomes a pop star, gets a record deal. And he's like, oh my God, it's going to come up again. What do I do? And so he thought, I'll just tour in Britain, which is absurd, right? So and every time they said, no, we need you to go to Germany or what? He's like, no, because I can't travel. This went on to the point where he'll tell you his story to the point where I'll get him on the show. But there's a point where the authorities went into Universal Music to arrest him and deport him. God. And Cash was deported to Jamaica. He wrote a whole album about it in the end.
And he'd never been to Jamaica or
no. This is the whole thing. Is they're saying we're sending you home, and people have never been to these countries. Their parents may have come from them, and their grandparents. Now, my father, for example, when my dad says to me, "There, but for the grace of God, go on." I said, "Dad, what do you mean?" He said, "I had a Jamaican passport, Colin, because I was in the RAF. I had to travel all the time. But you have to remember that most immigrants, whether they're from the West Indies or Turkey or wherever, normally what they have in common is the first wave will come over, you work as hard as you can, and you send money home. I've even done those adverts for Western Union, sending money home. And you send the money home, and then eventually you send for more of the family to come and join you." So he said, but the difference with being in the RAF is I had to travel. So he'd gone to the Middle East. He went to Bahrain. And he said, going out was fine. But I did check with my bosses, am I all right to travel on a Jamaican passport? And they said, yes, if you take that, you'll have to get a visa, and you've got what you call an RAF 1250 as your ID. You'll be fine. So he travels out to Bahrain. He's there for a year, unaccompanied. My mother stayed in Britain. We were sort of toddlers. And when he's coming back, he's on an RAF-only flight. They land in London. Everybody goes through, and my dad is taken off to a different room to be questioned. Now, he's in the RAF. And he's going, I've flown out, no problems. I've got my Jamaican passport. I'm on an RAF-only flight. I'm serving Queen and country. Why are you questioning me? He was there for an hour and a half, and this was just before Christmas, and he hadn't seen his young wife for a year. And he never wanted to join the RAF.
What year was this?
I think, I wish I could remember because I'm writing his book with him, and it was something like 58, 59. It was that sort of time. And he said to me that was the first. I said, well, did you go and try and get a British passport then? He said, no, we left it. And it wasn't until you and your brothers went to school in Cambridge, because the RAF would pay for a certain amount of your school fees. And my dad was always big on education. He said, right, so when you started at school, went to school in 73 and my brothers are older than me. He said, when your eldest brother started, we thought, right, we don't want you to have problems, because my dad was often we were stationed in Germany, Holland, Cyprus, in different countries around the world. So he would normally move every 2 or 3 years. So he said, I didn't want you to have problems at the airports. So we decided to get our British passports to make sure that you wouldn't have an issue, even though we know you and your brothers are born here. Having experienced that, I now knew it didn't matter. Even if I had the right paperwork, the color of my skin was going to be a problem. And so when this scandal emerged, my dad said, there but for the grace of God go I. Because had I not been in the RAF, I probably wouldn't have traveled very much, because most people from the West Indies were saving their money. And you tend to go back when it's a birthday or a funeral. And that, of course, is the other side of the nightmare, is that people have gone back for birthdays and funerals and they've not been allowed back in the country. And Richard Black was not allowed back for 40 years. And I met him with Yvette Cooper, who didn't have a lot to say. In fact, I was at a meeting yesterday and they said Yvette Cooper's totally U-turned on what she said originally. So she was going to help, now she's not going to help. And Richard said, how much do you compensate someone for if this happened to you? You've done nothing wrong. You've not been allowed back into the country that you've lived in all your life for 40 years. How much money would you want? What figure do you put on that?
Or you're like 17 and wanting to go on your school trip to France, and you just discover you've got no rights here and you've got no rights anywhere, because there's no assurance that a 17-year-old who's 2 generations away from the Windrush generation is going to have any rights in Jamaica either. Like,
correct.
You just suddenly a citizen of nowhere after your parents and your grandparents have worked so hard and contributed so much. And, in your case, your dad's got an MBE. You want to know what they want. It's
and that's why
and you shouldn't have to have an MBE. You shouldn't have to have been in the RAF to be treated like a human being in a country to which you were invited, that you already had citizenship to, and in a country where you have raised children or not raised children. None of this should be happening.
I know. And the impact on the people around the person that's suffering. They're having to lend the money, they're having to do it. So we're meeting people who, they've split up because the family can't cope. They're trying to pay their bills. It's very stressful. So Anthony Bryan, who they made a drama about on BBC One called Sitting in Limbo, Anthony's in Jamaica now, and he's got health issues, which he directly puts down to the stress he was put in detention twice.
Yeah.
And his partner, Janet, did all the paperwork collecting. They had mounds of paperwork.
God.
And the point is, most people would go, if you've got your national insurance and you've got your tax records, and even if you want to go, here's where I went to school, isn't that enough? But no, the burden of proof is so impossibly high. You can't.
Before I was a British citizen, because I was born and raised in Australia, and this is obviously a very, very different thing, but I know how complicated it is to prove. You have to prove a negative, almost like it's impossible, because I lost my passport. At one point, they lost a bit of the Home Office, and I know that sounds mad, but they did lose a bit of the Home. They didn't know where that bit of the Home Office had gone. That's what they said to me.
Wow.
And they lost all the records from that time, which were in paper. They weren't on computers yet. So my record of me coming here and getting indefinite leave to remain was in one of those missing boxes. And I lost my passport that had my indefinite leave to remain in it. And they said, the thing is, now you're going to have to prove you haven't left for any period of 2 years. And I said, okay, well, I can, because these are the years I was at university. These are the years that I worked here. This is my landlord has given me, yes, she was here. And I went to a meeting at the Home Office and they said, the thing is, it's really hard. The woman said to me, I was born and raised in Britain, been here all my life, but you can't prove you haven't left. It's proving a negative. She said, I couldn't prove it. She said, I have never left. But she said, how can you prove it? She said, because someone could rent you a flat and you could not be in it. You could be doing a job, but you could be doing it remotely. She was like, you just can't prove it. And so I was nearly deported because of it.
There you go.
And, and so, and I am white. I have dual citizenship with Australia. I was born and raised in Australia. I now have citizenship here, thank God. I now have a passport here, but my whole life was here. And I was like, what? But I am from a Commonwealth country, but I wasn't invited here to do work at a time when laborers were needed and service industry people were needed and nurses were needed. That wasn't my story at all. And so I'm not in any way comparing this as saying it's an injustice. It's just that I know the complexity of it. And I understand how you can be like, no, but I thought, oh, I've got everything. I'll be fine. And she looked through it and she went, you've got, she was so nice to me. She said, I couldn't prove it either.
Which is why I said, because a lot of people think it's people just from the Caribbean. And I said, no, it's 65 countries from the Commonwealth. But my son's girlfriend lived in Australia, and she said to me, she's from Britain, but she said, I remember when I went out there, I had no issues getting into Australia because of the colour of my skin, but I had friends who did, and we had exactly the same paperwork. So she said, I saw it directly.
Oh,
So
I've
she said,
seen it, Colin.
you
I've been
know,
in
you know what I'm
queues.
saying.
I've been in queues where the brown people have been treated totally different from me.
There you
And
go.
then I've been stamped through. I've seen it, when I was young, traveling all over the world. And every time there'd be brown and black people taken to the side and I would be waved through. And sometimes I think, oh my God, I haven't got the right thing or I haven't got the proof. Someone ahead of me, I remember backpackers in Germany being told, can you prove you're going to leave? And they're like, yes, here are our URL passes. Here's the nights we're staying at this hostel. Then we're here. They had their whole travel plan. I had nothing because Australians often travel in a very itinerant way. Like I'll see how it is. I'll turn up. I might stay here tonight. I might keep going. Like it's it certainly was then. Australian backpackers would rarely have set plans. Well, in my experience anyway, maybe some people are shouting at me saying, yes, we did. But I didn't. So I'd be like, yeah, well, I might stay in Berlin tonight. I'll wander around, find a place I like the look of, stay for a couple of nights, and then I might go on from. These people had everything. They had 2 nights booked here, 3 nights booked. They probably had it because they knew this was going to happen and they had to have it. And me as a white person didn't have to have it. But I remember thinking, gosh, I've got nothing. Watching them be bailed up and grilled and thinking, I don't have anything. I'm not going to get allowed in. They're taken off to an office. I am literally waved through, just stamped and waved through. I'm not asked one damn question. I didn't have any proof of anything. And I
Well,
was like,
Deborah, you are
holy
getting
fuck.
to the heart of the matter, which is beautiful. I'm so glad you've put the story in that way, because when people go, understandably, kind of go, sorry, what is Windrush? I don't really understand it. The simple answer is it's institutional racism dressed up with lots of very complex immigration and citizenship legislation that is deliberately obtuse and deliberately difficult and deliberately skewed towards people who are black and brown. And that's the reality of it. So what the lawyers have to come along and do is try and unpick that. And if you've got no legal aid, you've kind of got no chance. So that's why the one shout out I must do before I know you've got to go is that the reason we're doing this big event on, for those listening, there's Windrush Day is June the 22nd. So we're doing this event on June the 21st in the De Beauvoir Church in Hackney. It's a beautiful little church in a wonderful area. And it's going to basically be 2 halves. The first half will be us showing our campaign videos that thankfully lots of people are watching.
And then will we be able to put them out on socials as well? Will people be able to see them on our socials?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
We'd love you to. So we're putting those up, and then we're just putting one out today, actually, that Annie's just literally, while we've been talking, and he's just allowed me to use the music on them. But we're sending out this lovely little pay it forward video where we're asking high profile people to do a little video about what Windrush means to them, so we can share it on our socials and play some of them on the night. But what we really want to do is to get people to go and buy a ticket on Eventbrite, because we want the victims to come for free. And of course, we've got to stage the whole thing, and we're a charity and we're a startup, and it costs money. So we want people to pay for tickets so we can allow the people affected by this to not have to pay for tickets. And we'll be providing Caribbean food, rum punch, and there's a Windrush band all night. So it's going to be a mixture of celebration and commemoration.
So that's 21st of June in Hackney. Where can people get tickets?
21st of June in Hackney via Eventbrite, and you can go to our Instagram at J4, the number 4 Windrush, and click on the link in the bio, which will take you straight to Eventbrite. And the tickets it's really kind of pay what you can, but we've said it's £5, £10, £15 if you want to support what we're doing, so we can do more videos and tell more stories. Then you pay the solidarity ticket, which is £30.
So go to @J4 Windrush. That stands for Justice for Windrush. You can click through there. Also, we can put something on the Guilty Feminist socials about it, so you can click through as well. And if you can only give a fiver, give a fiver.
Correct.
But if you can give £15 or more to £10 or £15 or more to help the people currently struggling, survivors and those who are continuing to survive this, that would be incredibly well
I have to
appreciated.
say that our Windrush lawyer, Deborah, Pauline Campbell, who's remarkable, she gets up at 5 in the morning every day to work with our victims and then goes to her day job at Waltham Forest Council.
Bless
Every
her.
day, doesn't charge a penny, and she
Wow.
would be charging £300 an hour. And I asked her the other day, how much would, if people were all paying you, Pauline, how much would you have clocked up since we've become a charity in July 24? And she said, currently about £65,000.
Wow.
But I'm refused. She said, I'm Caribbean ancestry, Colin. I am not. I feel their pain,
Her
and they're
reward
all
will be greater
traumatized.
in
I
heaven, I
cannot
tell
take
you.
money from them. And so that's when we went. We need help from other lawyers. So the good news is that we've got so many lovely things happening. We've got the TV drama we're developing, but we're also setting up a program with Lincoln University. We're going to develop Windrush ambassadors at every university. So the young, because we gave a talk in Lincoln, and these students came up to me afterwards going, I didn't know anything about this. Why don't I know about the history of this country? Why is this not taught in school? I'm really angry. I feel cheated. And I said, well, I'm creating an army of Windrush ambassadors at every university. So every time we do an event, you can spread the message in your particular part of the country. They went, oh, can I be a part of it? And yeah. And then Lincoln University came up to me and said, we've got a fund for that, Colin. We'll develop that for you from October, which is amazing. And then we've got another university who've just come forward, LSE, saying we would love to develop a hardship fund with you so we can look at when you raise this money that these lovely people you're talking to are going to give you, we can work out who benefits, how you help them best, and have a whole system worked out for them. So we're really kind of building something that we hope. We obviously want justice, but as I said to Yvette Cooper when I met her, I said, you can make all the lovely noises you want about having a Windrush ambassador and not a Windrush ambassador, a Windrush commissioner, sorry. They wanted to create a Windrush commissioner, I think later this month or next month. And we're kind of going, what's that going to do if you've already got a system that needs lawyers and legal aid and you're not providing them? It's all nonsense. So I said, the only way when you've got massive things in people's heads right now from Trump to Ukraine to Gaza, you will not get anywhere with this until you educate the nation and they understand the depth of this scandal and the depth of the pain that you're causing, not just to one lot of people, but to all of their descendants. So, and the length of the history of it. It started in 1948. So it only came to light because of Theresa May turbocharging it in 2012. But we've got loads of people who were already suffering before 2012. So this has been going on for a long time. And I say the simple story is they came here, they were invited here, they were British citizens. They came to rebuild this country after the war. They worshipped this country. And sadly, they were met with racism. And that was dressed up with lots of different laws. And that's what we're trying to unpick. And what I'm encouraged by is that when I spoke to all those lovely ladies in Lincolnshire, most of whom did not know the history, all of them just said, once you know, you care.
Yes,
and I said,
I think that's right.
That's it.
And I do think most people in this country will. What can our listeners do to support Windrush Justice? Petitions, MPs, donations, showing up on Windrush Day, all of those?
Yes, we've got to yes, turn up at the event obviously on the 21st, but we've got a website. On the website, and some of you might be able to see this, maybe you don't, but this is a newly printed Justice for Windrush t-shirt. So we're now trying to do some merchandise so we can raise money that way as well. So we've got t-shirts and baseball caps on the website, but also the point is that when you go to the website, there's a template to write to the Department of Education to say, get the history of British colonialism taught in schools. We're working with the Black Curriculum, who have been working for the last few years on getting British colonialism into schools, so we're collaborating with them. We're also saying to people, obviously donate, but the point is talk to your MP, write to your MP as well. So we've got templates for those letters for the MP and for the Education Department on the website. And the best way to really change things is to share our films, because the films are very emotive, they're very impactful. I think we've had the ladies in Lincolnshire, as I call it. If you go onto @J for Windrush, you'll see about 5 or 6 films the ladies have made. One of them's got 100,000 views, and the comments are incredible. Of people just going, "This is outrageous. I agree with these ladies," and so on. And you're putting a white face to it, which is really important to say we have white allies in this. This is not one of the big points. Is this is not a black issue. This is a human rights issue that affects black people.
Yes.
And if you care about humanity, you'll care about this. And as I said in the strapline to the lovely video, we can't reveal the twist of, but you've seen, is that the strapline on the end of that is no one is safe when documents are weaponized against you, and that can happen to any of us. And if you look at America right now, that's what's happening on a massive scale.
Happening on a massive scale. we need to keep reform out here, because otherwise we'll become the unofficial 51st state, because it'll be
There
exactly
you
that
go.
playbook.
There you go. And that's what led to this. Thank you for saying that, Deborah, because without Nigel Farage, sadly, the turbocharging in 2012 happened because they went, oh, we've got to have a race to the bottom and keep up with Nigel Farage. No. I had dinner with that man once when I did Question Time. My lovely friend Bonnie Greer, who you've met and talked to. And Bonnie was on the panel and she said, Colin, join us for dinner afterwards. It was David Dimbleby doing Question Time. And I sat in front of Nigel Farage. And it was just before Obama came to power. And I put my hand up in the audience and said, they'd asked, why is he so successful and why are people, loving him at the moment? It's before he became president. And I said, because he's a great communicator and he's got a great way of talking to his audience. And so I think they connect with that. And whatever I said, the audience all applauded. I sit in, I think it was the Bernie Grant Center, ironically, after we'd finished the recording. And we're all sat there having dinner. And Farage just sat opposite me. And he just went, oh, you're the Obama lover. And got up and went off to have a cigarette.
Oh, my God.
Now, I have to tell you, for all your listeners out there, when people go, oh, yes, I know he's populist and this, that, and the other, but blah, 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 and I go, as a person of color, let me tell you, when you meet someone who is racist from their head to their toe, you feel it in every being of your body. And I felt it in that moment. And I am gobsmacked that so many people fall for it. But again, it comes back to a lack of education.
Yes.
And I think that's why I said our strapline is educate the nation. And slowly, as people understand. And I say those ladies in Lincolnshire, for me, gave me so much hope because they started that. You'll see the videos on our Instagram. But when we started that talk with them, they really didn't know much about it. By the time they'd had a history lesson, met Chris, met our lawyer, and gone, oh my God, I didn't understand the depth of this. I didn't understand the roots of this. And as one of the ladies said, of course, she said, you'll see this lovely lady called Maria on our Instagram who gets very emotional. And she said, I didn't understand. But of course, they came here, they were invited here to rebuild the country. And she said, she gives a wonderful analogy. She said, it's like if my husband had passed away and I'm now on my own and I ask my family to come and help me rebuild my home and rebuild my life, I get back to where I want to be. And then I turn around to them and I go, well, I'm all right now, so you can all piss off.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like.
And that's what they've done.
But it's horrible. Justice delayed is justice denied. Please get involved in the Justice for Windrush campaign any way you can. Follow them on socials, go to their website, join their mailing list, throw them any money that you've got. Get involved, educate your relatives. The more that we talk about it, the more there are dramas on TV, the more something will be done. We do need a drama like the Mr. Bates in the post office, because it really changed everybody's mind about it. So we wish you well with that, and we'll do whatever we can in between. Thank you so much, Colin McFarlane. You are doing...
Well, we have a fabulous writer. The lovely Roy Williams is our writer of the drama.
Great.
He's lined up. He's currently working with David Harewood on the Channel 4 drama, but he's lined up for it. And so, yeah, we're in schools, we're in universities, we're on socials, as you know. And as we discussed, Deborah, when I last saw you at that lovely event at the King's Head Theatre, it's really important to get people also off socials into the real world.
Into the real world, absolutely. Into the real world. Having the conversations in rooms, coming.
Exactly.
Go along to that event if you're available, because there'll be lovely Caribbean food. You'll meet people. It'll change you.
My father will be talking there. The victims will be talking there. I think we've got confirmed. We've got Ashley B. We've got Patterson Joseph, Jocelyn G. Essien, Eddie Marsden. And we're now literally today as we speak. I don't know when this goes out, so it'll have been going out. We'll be now hitting and approaching more names. So we will make announcements. If you just follow us on @J4Windrush on Instagram, we will do updates each week of who's attending on the lead up to the show.
I will be in Australia, so I'm going to miss it, sadly. But if I were,
I would
be there. Thank you so.
Well, we'll do one next year.
Thank you. Yes, please.
6:30. Come along. 6:30 till about 9:30. Come along. Come next year, Deborah, and let's keep talking. This is not something that is going to be solvable quickly. I think we have to. My way of looking at it is, when we've got 70-80% of the country aware of what's going on, we'll get change. And at the moment, we've probably got about 5% truly aware of what's happening.
All right. We'll do our best to spread the word. Thank you so much, Colin McFarlane. Thank you for coming on The Guilty Feminist.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. The Guilty Feminist is provided exclusively from Acast. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.